A Child's Christmas in Wales. When you have flown over as many winters as I have, you begin to recognize the shapes of places from very far away. The jagged line of a mountain range, the soft curve of a river valley, the way a coastline bends like a sleeping dragon around a black, restless sea. And there's one stretch of coast I always know at once. No matter how thick the clouds or how loud the wind, the little towns and villages of Wales. From above, on a clear Christmas Eve, they look like handfuls of lanterns scattered along the edge of the dark water. Rows of small houses cling to steep streets that tumble down toward the harbor, roofs dusted with snow like icing on loaves of bread. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin, hopeful threads. There's always a smell in the air there that I love. Coal and salt and something sweet baking in ovens that have seen many winters. One year, many years ago now, I remember one particular Welsh town more clearly than all the rest. It was small and huddled close, as if all the houses had leaned inward against the wind and decided to stay that way. The sea was stormy that night, crashing against the rocks beyond the harbor wall, sending up plumes of spray that froze in the air and fell back as glittering shards. The moonlight slipped in and out of racing clouds, making the snow on the hills gleam and then dim again, like the breath of a sleeping giant. I was high above it all at first, sleigh runners whispering along the edge of the clouds, reindeer sure-footed even in the sky. But as I passed over that little town, something tugged at my attention. Not a shout, not a cry, but a bright, small warmth, like a candle in a drafty room refusing to go out. I dipped lower, curious. The rooftops rose toward me, slate roofs, crooked chimneys, lines of washing frozen in mid-flap. From some houses came the sound of singing, voices rising together in old, familiar carols. From others, came laughter, clatter, the sounds of many people talking at once. But from one narrow house, halfway up a steep street, came something quieter and, in its own way, more powerful. It was the sound of a child's imagination at full gallop. Through a small, steamed-up window, I could see a living room, crowded with more furniture than it had space for. A coal fire glowed in the grate, making shadows jump on the faded wallpaper. A little artificial tree, brave and slightly crooked, stood on a low table, decorated with paper chains and a few treasured ornaments. There were a few modest parcels beneath it, wrapped in leftover paper from other years. And sprawled on a threadbare rug in front of the fire was a boy. He was perhaps 8 or 9, all elbows and knees, with dark hair that refused to stay tidy, and eyes that sparkled as if they had stolen some light from the fire. Around him lay an army of toy soldiers, some with paint chipped from many battles. Beside them stood a cardboard fortress he had clearly built himself, its towers leaning, its gate drawn in pencil. He was talking quietly, but with great seriousness, to a thin, gray cat curled up beside him, whose tail flicked slowly in the heat. And then, he was saying, marching a soldier up the arm of the chair, he climbed the tallest mountain in all of Wales, right up past the clouds, and that's where he met him. Met who? His mother asked from the armchair opposite, knitting needles clicking softly in her hands. Santa, of course, the boy replied, as if there could be no other answer. But not the ordinary way. Not down a chimney like everyone else, on the top of the mountain, in the snowstorm, when everyone else was asleep. That's where you'd meet him if you were in a story. His mother smiled, eyes tired but fond. And what was this soldier doing up a mountain on Christmas Eve? Shouldn't he have been at home with his family? The boy hesitated. The soldier paused mid-climb. He didn't have much of a family, he said, with the matter-of-factness children often have about difficult things. His dad had to go away to work on the ships, and his mom was tired all the time and worried about money. And his big sister moved to the city. So he thought if he went up the mountain, maybe he'd find a bigger sort of Christmas, one with proper magic. His mother's hands slowed for a moment. She glanced at the small tree, the thin fire, the single string of lights that flickered bravely along the mantel. Then she looked back at him. And did he? She asked. The boy grinned. Oh yes, Santa found him there. Of course he did. Santa always finds the ones who go looking for him. Up on the roof, I could not help but smile. Does he now? I murmured to the reindeer. They snorted softly, snow dusting from their harnesses. Inside, the boy was arranging his soldiers on the hearth, his voice gaining speed as he slipped deeper into his invention. So Santa lands the sleigh right on the very peak, he said, and the snow is blowing sideways, and you can't see anything at all, only the red of his coat in the white. And the soldier thinks he must be dreaming, but Santa takes off his gloves and holds his hands out to warm them, and says, "You must be freezing, boy. What are you doing all the way up here?" "What is he doing up there?" his mother asked, half teasing, half prompting. He says, "I came to see if Christmas is real. Not the presents and all that, the real bit, the bit that doesn't melt away." His mother's knitting paused again. For a moment, the only sounds were the hiss of the coal and the distant boom of the sea against the harbor wall. "And what does Santa say?" she asked very quietly now. The boy picked up the soldier and held him toward the fire as if presenting him to some invisible judge. He says, "If you came all this way just to ask that, then you already know the answer. You don't climb mountains for things that are pretend." I felt that line land in the room like a soft weight on both of them. Children say things in their stories that they might be too shy or too frightened to say outright. And parents hear what they need to hear in the tales they are invited into. The mother cleared her throat softly. "That sounds like a very wise Santa," she said. "Did he give the boy anything?" The boy thought for a moment. "A story," he said finally, "so that when he went back down the mountain and it was just the same little town and the same little house and the same worries, he'd still have something big inside his head, something that no one could take away, not even if they were poor or sad or frightened." He set the soldier down and looked up at his mother. "That's the best sort of present, isn't it?" She nodded slowly. "It is," she said. "And you have a whole army of them right there." She tapped the side of his head gently with a knitting needle. "You always have." He blushed, suddenly shy under the compliment, and turned back to his game. But I could see that her words had warmed him more than the fire did. I have delivered many fine things to that little town in Wales over the centuries. Wooden trains and books and dolls and balls that bounce higher than they have any right to. I have brought warm clothing, new boots, boxes of chocolates, puzzles with missing pieces that are found under the sofa in May. But that night, listening to a boy invent a meeting with me on a mountain I knew well, I realized I was also being given something. I was being given a child's Christmas in Wales from the inside. Later, much later, when the boy was finally convinced to go to bed, after leaving out a slightly squashed mince pie and a small glass of milk on the mantel, with a note in spiky handwriting that said, "For Santa, if you are real, I think you are," I slipped quietly down the chimney. The room smelled of smoke and wool and the faint tang of the sea sneaking in around the window frames. The cat opened one eye, decided I was not interesting enough to bother about, and went back to sleep. The tree hummed quietly with its feeble lights. I picked up the note and read it again. "If you are real, I think you are." It was not a challenge. It was a confession. A small, brave hand reaching out into the dark and hoping something would take it. I ate the mince pie, drank the milk, and then, just for him, I took a scrap of paper from my pocket and wrote a reply. "Thank you for the story," I wrote. "The mountain was very cold, but the boy was very brave. Christmas is real, even when it is small, especially then. Keep climbing inside your imagination. I will always find you there." I placed it beside the empty plate and then turned to my sack. There was a book for him. Tales of far-off countries and strange creatures, of storms and ships and mysterious islands. There was a new set of paints and brushes and a small pad of paper. For his mother, there was a pair of warm slippers and a tin of biscuits that, I suspected she would share, but also secretly keep a few for herself, the way tired mothers sometimes must. Before I left, I did one more thing. On the cold window pane, with a gloved fingertip, I traced the faint outline of a mountain peak and a tiny sleigh just above it. By morning, it would have blurred and vanished, but perhaps, for a few quiet minutes, it would catch his eye and make him smile. Then I was up and out, back into the wild Welsh wind, the sleigh rising quickly above the roofs. As we climbed, I looked back at the little house, at the row of chimneys, at the restless sea beyond. I thought of the many children dreaming in those narrow bedrooms, in that town, and all the others like it, their hopes and worries tucked in beside them like extra blankets. Years passed, as they always do. That boy grew taller. The crutches by someone's bed in town were someone else's. Ships came and went. Some families left for cities. Others arrived, new to the salt and the hills. The little artificial tree was replaced, eventually with a slightly less crooked one. The mother's hair grew white. The boy's stories changed shape and grew longer. He started to write them down instead of simply telling them to the cat. And me, I kept coming back every December, my sleigh skimming low over that town in Wales, listening for that particular kind of sound, a child making something large out of something small, turning a narrow room into a wide world with nothing more than words and love. Those are the Christmases I remember most clearly. Not the grand glittering ones, but the ones where the tree is a bit lopsided, the fire is a bit thin, the wind rattles the windows. And still, someone inside is determined to make something beautiful out of it all. So when I think of a child's Christmas in Wales, I think of him, elbows on the rug, cat at his side, inventing a Santa who meets him on a mountain and tells him what he already secretly believes, that real things are worth climbing for. I think of his mother, knitting hope into every stitch while she listens. I think of the little house holding its own against the dark sea and the long winter. And I hope wherever you are, whatever your own Christmas looks like this year, grand or small, crowded or quiet, that you remember this, even in the narrowest streets and the tiniest rooms, even on the roughest coasts and the hardest years, there is room for a story that makes you braver. There is room for you to make your own memory, one that will warm you many winters from now. And when you lie awake wondering if I am real, whispering to the ceiling or the cat or the quiet air, know this, I am listening, I am flying, and I always find my way to the children who go looking for me, not just on rooftops, but on the mountains inside their hearts. Merry Christmas from the sky above Wales, from the sleigh, from the old man who treasures your stories as much as you treasure his.